Way to go, guys. Let's move our content box from the middle of the screen to the left side of the screen. I want us to add a call to action button right beneath the paragraph. Such a button we can achieve using an anchor tag such that when someone clicks on it, it performs an action. Okay, so we use an anchor tag. We set the anchor tag in our HTML to be within this div, but right under the paragraph. Anchor tag is A. Let's give it a class of btn. Btn, which is short for button, and the text we'll put within should be consult us, call to action button that beckons on the person browsing your website to click to consult your company. All right. For our intent right now, let's move the entire content box from the middle of the screen to the left side of the screen. We do that by setting the justify content property from center to flex start. That moves the content box to the left end of the screen. Now, the anchor tag or call to action button we just added is right here. It's faint. That's why we can't see it. So we're going to style the A or the anchor tag for this to be visible enough. And one good thing is I'd like to use this to introduce a pseudo class to us. Let's see how this goes. Styling our anchor tag now, we'll go over to CSS. We have an anchor tag with a class of button. That's a selector a.btn. We'll give it a color. Let's give it a background color first. A background color of orange. All right. If we go over to our page, you see there a background color of orange. Then we can make the text bold enough. That's a font size bigger. Let's give it a font size of 24 pixels. All right, it's coming up bold, and a color of white. Good. There is an underline which is normal for hyperlinks. We're going to take that out using the text decoration property. We're going to set the text decoration to none. That takes out the underline. Okay. Next, let's give this anchor tag or this button some spacing within, some internal spacing. Remember the box model, the internal spacing of an element we set using the padding property. So go over and set the padding of the button to 20 pixels. Set to 20 pixels. This is what we have. All right. But I want us to have wider padding to the right and to the left and to the top and bottom. This is how it goes. We could set the top and bottom to 10 pixels while the right and left to 20 pixels. If you set the padding property and you give it two values, the first value represents top and bottom padding, while the next or the second value represents right to left padding. So this is what we have. We can increase the right to left padding 40 pixels. So the button goes wider. All right. Let's set the button, our anchor tags. Anchor tags are by default inline elements. Let's set the display property. We're going to set the display property to inline block. Remember, thus far, you already know elements are either block level elements or inline elements. Block level elements take the full width of the screen. Inline elements just take the width of the content placed within it and whatever padding is set, as in this case. Then in between inline and block level elements, there's what we call inline block. Inline block is a block level element that doesn't take the full width of the screen. For what it's worth, we're going to use this anchor tag or call to action button to get to see what happens when we set the display property of this element through the different display types. First, let's set it to a display property of block. Anchor tag, display property of block. You can see it takes the full weight of the container it is in. The container is this div, and the entire weight of the div is from here to here. But then the div has a padding all round. That is why the button takes this space from here to here. All right. Now, if we give the button the property of inline, which is its default nature, you can now see that the button seems to be overlapping with these two words. It's overlapping with the paragraph, which is not ideal. But when it's at block level, it's not overlapping the paragraph anymore, just that it runs from one end of the div box to the other. All right. Best display property to set this our call to action button to is inline block, such that it doesn't run full width and it doesn't overlap the paragraph. So let's go over and change the display property to inline block. That's it right here. It's neither running full width, it's self-contained now, which is appropriate sizing for it, and it's not overlapping the paragraph. We can also decide to move it some spaces away from the paragraph. That is by setting the margin property. Remember, padding is internal spacing, while margin is external spacing. So let's give it a margin top. We can only set the top margin. We don't need to set every other margins. Give it a margin top of, give our call to action button a margin top of 40 pixels. Just to push it away from the paragraph, which is more befitting in this case. We could choose to change the color, the font color of this our call to action button from white to black. Over here, we already gave it previously a white font color. So let's take it from white to black. All right, it's now black. And make the font size a bit bigger from 24 pixels to 32 pixels. Okay, and the font weight, let's set the font weight to bold. Good, it's bold. That's it. Let's take a moment at this point to look into font family. We could change the font family or the font type of the text in our content box. What we have here is the default font family or font type. Let's start with the call to action button. Notice the characters or the font type we have here. I want us to go change it using the font family property. Font family. Let's change it to something like Verdana. You see, the font type has changed. It no longer has those sharp edges. If I revert it, this is what it was. Look at the U has some kind of sharp edges, and the C and the L. But when we change the font family to Verdana, this is how it now looks. Okay, we set the font family thus far on just the anchor tag, with a class of btn. What if we want this font family to apply to all the content on our web page? What we will do is to use the universal selector to set that. What I mean is we can take out this font family from here and it reverts back to default, and instead move it to our universal selector. Remember, our universal selector is the asterisk. It's represented by an asterisk. So we'll come over here and put the font family, or let's set it from scratch. Set the font family to Verdana, or just like that, and everything changes as you can see right now. If you choose to change the font family to something else like Roboto, it also changes by default. It is now a bit bigger. All right, I think I like this font family. Let's remove the Vedana and go with this Roboto. Then, yes, Roboto, Oxygen, Ubuntu. What happens is that it will give other options as a fallback in case the user's device does not have any of these, then there will be a fallback. That is why we have several font types separated by a comma right here. Okay, obviously the paragraph font size now looks too big because we changed the font type. Let's go down and scale down on the paragraph font size. Paragraph font size right now is 28 pixels. Let's take it down to 20 pixels and see how that goes. Alright, that's a bit more befitting for our purpose right now. Let's pimp this our call to action button a little bit with some more styles to add some effigy to it. One of which we could make these sharp edges to have rounded corners, and that we can get to do with the border radius property. We could also give our button a border so that it could stand out a bit more impressively. Let's go over to our code editor to get that done. First of all, this is the button selector. These are the declarations for the button. Let's give the button a border of 4 pixels solid white. That's it. Our button now has a border of 4 pixels solid white. If you think the border is too thick, you can just scale it down a little bit to 3 pixels solid white. That's it right there. Now let's make the edges of the button rounded. That property you've already seen before is the border radius property. Let's set it. The property for this you might already know is the border radius property. Let's set it to 10 pixels. That's the button with the border radius of 10 pixels. Notice that the edges are no longer sharp, they are now a bit rounded, which gives a sleek kind of effect. If you want the button to have a more roundish edge, you just go over to your CSS and increase the value of the border radius property to, let's say, 45 pixels. And there you have it, a more roundish edged button. Having done this, let's proceed now to create the next section for this web page of ours. Thus far, we've created a hero section, which is the first section on the web page, with a background image and some content right here. A heading, a paragraph, an anchor tag used to make a button that's clickable. The next section for this web page will be created in the next episode of this FlexBox series. See you right there.